schedule, your class schedule, if you by chance have it, not in the parables package, we'll look at that in just a moment, but the class schedule, mine might be different than yours. On mine, it was had us out for 2 weeks at the end of November, and if by chance yours says that, make a correction. We will be in class on the 30th, okay? So we have class tonight, the 2nd, we have class on the 9th and the 16th, then we're out on the 23rd, that's Thanksgiving Day, but this year it was different. Usually Thanksgiving is the last Thursday of the month, and it's not, it's the 4th Thursday. This year it just happens to not be the last, because there are 5 Thursdays, so we're out 1 week on the 23rd if you need to make a correction to your schedule. We come back on the 30th, then we have 2 classes in December, the 7th and the 14th. So counting tonight, we have 6 classes left, 5 more after tonight. So again, I'm not sure if that's the way your schedule reads or not, but wanted to make that correction if for some reason it did not. If you notice the class schedule in the packet of the parables, tonight we're on page 24, class 8, 24, page 24, money and idol in every generation. And while you're turning there, I'm grateful that Rob was the one that led us in our prayer and in our song. I was thinking on the way down, it was coming up in a couple of weeks, November the 12th of the year 2000, that Rob baptized me into Christ 23 years ago here in a couple of weeks. And I was just, that thought hit me on the way down this evening. I was glad to see Rob here and appreciate all the work that he's done with me through the years. And starting that night when he baptized me into Christ. We have fewer in number, it seems, this evening. Maybe they're hibernating with the cold weather. 44, first time under 50, I think, this year. So maybe we'll pick it back up next week. All right, 24. Let's read the text. Luke chapter 12, verse 13 beginning. Luke chapter 12, verse 13 beginning. And then we will get into our notes on page 24. Then one from the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or an arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of things he possesses." Then Jesus spoke a parable to them, saying, "The ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, What shall I do, since I have no room to store my crops? So he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build greater. And there I will store all my crops and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, Fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be which you have provided? So is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God." Luke chapter 12, verses 13 through 21. I titled this parable, Money and Idol in Every Generation. Notice in the introduction on page 24, it is not sinful to have money or property or savings or any other means by which it is necessary to provide for yourself and family. We need to remember that. It's not sinful to have money and to do good with it. Of course, what we're noticing is a wrong relationship with it, letting the money possess you, and serving the money rather than God, loving the money more than God. As a matter of fact, the Bible teaches us to earn money and to do good with it. Give work so you might be able to give those to those who are in need, Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 28. And doing good as you help others in 1 John chapter 3 and verse 17. We see in Acts chapter 2, as well as in Acts chapter 4, verses 32 through 37, that the saints in Jerusalem were sharing with one another, giving with one another. Some were even selling their goods, their property, so they could give to others. So they had a right attitude about the money that the Lord had given them to do good with it. Let me say this, I love the King James translation, so I'm not speaking against the King James translation here, okay? And I'm certainly not a scholar when it comes to the biblical languages, but I did want to point this out, the King James translation of 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 10 has, in my opinion, caused some to view money as the ultimate cause of evil and sin, because it says the love of money is the root of all evil. However, when you consider all the sin in the world that does not involve money, even the first sin in the garden, Adam and Eve, the second sin that's recorded at least with Cain and Abel, I believe other translations are a little more accurate with Paul's warning about money when he says, for the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Again, I appreciate all of the English translations we have, and I recommend, reading in all of them. That's one of the best ways to study the Bible, reading from one translation to the next and your cross-references. I'll give you an example here. This is an example. When Rob baptized me at Dovertown, they purchased for me a New King James Text Bible, the same one that I have here. This is not it, but the same type, the same copy at least. And so I used that for the first couple of years, but then when I started preaching at Mount Harmony, they asked if I would preach from the King James text, and I gladly did. And I noticed right away some differences, and this was one of the differences I noticed. I thought, well, the King James says it's the root of all evil. New King James says it's a root of all evil. There's a little difference there. So I do believe a root, when you consider how, there are sins that does not include money. Now, selfishness is behind every sin. That's something to remember. The fact of the matter is that money has caused many people to commit evil. You think of the crime and the robbery, the murder, the deceit, the lies, breaking up a family, on and on and on we could go for the love of money and the evil love of it. Money has also been the cause for some of God's children to forsake Him. For example, the younger son that we studied in the prodigal son in Luke chapter 15, give me my inheritance. Let me take it now. He went and wasted it all. It is important to remember that the amount is not under consideration, but the priorities. That's something that is very important that we remember. You can sin with $1 just as easy as you can sin with $1 million. It's the priorities. It's your relationship with it. And sometimes the Lord will bless us with more because we've been found faithful and we're doing good with it. My prayer from time to time is if I'll be found faithful with it and I'll do good with it, if you're willing, Lord, give me more to do more with it. But if not, keep it from me. Because it might be that the Lord has given me just what I need, not too much or not too little. And it might be a little more, might be what would cause this fella to walk away from the Lord. And I don't want to do that either. I want what I can handle. And so sometimes I'll pray, if I can handle more, give it to me and let me do good with it. If not, I'm certainly grateful and content with what I have. The rich young ruler went away sorrowful because he had great possessions, as you know. Parents and church leaders must see the seriousness of teaching the young about faithfulness and accountability of being good stewards with the Lord's money. And we must continue to remind adults to do the same. Jesus talked about money and the dangers of it often. Because our Lord discussed it, we must do the same. Because He talked about money often, church leaders should realize the need to emphasize faithfulness with the Lord's money and the dangers it can potentially cause in life and eternity. I think some of the best classes we were able to have, we had some of our deacons who special knowledge in money and certainly with the biblical knowledge as well to teach our young adult classes on money, what the Bible says about it and how to handle it the right way. I certainly would recommend VP Black's material on the subject. Some of you might still have that in written form. It was circulating around on VHS. I don't know if you can still find it or not, but Rust is a Witness and My God and My Money, great works that Brother VP Black did in helping the church understand a little more about money. Kyle Butt did kind of a spin-off, if you will, of that, and he titled it My God and His Money. And it's produced by World Video Bible School, and I've given the website because you can watch it for free. It won't cost you a dime. You can go in there and watch it for free. It'd be a great opportunity to watch together with your family or maybe even at church in a Bible class to know more about what the Bible has to say on this very important subject.
Can I give you one quote from Dr. VP? He was so plain, a lot of people didn't like his teaching, and they were complaining to Brother Black teaches tithing. I deny it completely. It is not true. I have only taught tithing as a beginning and then go upward.
Did y'all hear that in the back? Yeah, great point. I appreciate you bringing that out. I had forgotten that. I had forgotten that one, and that's a good one that I need to write down. Yes, a beginning point and going upward from there. I did hear him say once that you never see a case of it in the New Testament of being less than 10%, other than maybe Ananias and Sapphira in Acts 5. And you can check that for yourself, but I do remember hearing V.P. Black make that comment. And I might give another quote by him later, one that I just thought about. It's not in your notes, but I might try to find it and give it to you later. Notice the setting, Luke chapter 12, verses 1 through 12. A large crowd had gathered, and Jesus is once again using the hypocrisy of the Pharisees as an example of what to avoid. This is what's going on, and the Pharisees doing what is wrong. If you look at verse 1 and then also verses 11 and 12, kind of lends the idea that maybe although a crowd is there, he's speaking with his apostles directly in these first 12 verses. You notice the request and the response. This gentleman comes to him in verses 13 through 15 from the crowd, "Tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." I think it's interesting to notice that Jesus says, no, this doesn't concern me, and I'm not going to mess with it. You notice Jesus did not concern himself with every little aspect of people's personal lives. We don't have to either. Now, we have a responsibility, of course, to help one another and bear one another's burdens. I realize this, but sometimes people are just trying to pull us into areas that sometimes they just don't involve us. And Jesus says, man, who made me a judge or an arbitrator over you? He didn't deal with that. That wasn't any of his concern. What he did do instead is he used this as an opportunity to teach. And he taught this parable that begins in verse 16. Notice just a little bit about the parable. Again, you have this ground of a certain rich man that yielded plentifully. Sometimes you'll hear this parable titled The Rich Farmer. Sometimes it's titled The Rich Fool. But it gave him much. And he thought within himself, saying, what shall I do? And this is something I'm realizing that I left out of your notes. Notice his focus was on himself. I failed to put this in your notes. I apologize. Notice verse 17 beginning. He thought within himself, saying, what shall I do, since I have no room to store my crops? Do you see the personal pronouns there? So he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build greater. And there I will store all my crops and my goods. And I will say to my soul. So it was all about him rather than God who had blessed him. All blessings come from God. He gave the ground, he gave the seed, he gave the rain, and he gave the ability to work. But this rich man thought that it was all about him. The rich man was focused on his blessings rather than God who gave them to him. Again, there's nothing wrong with having things, having nice things. However much or little you might think you have, I guarantee you have a lot. You go with Sister Posey's son was just about a week ago over to Burma if you don't think that you have a lot. I guarantee you have a lot. But the problem is when we begin to serve our blessings rather than the blessing giver. The attitude is wrong when the rich man decided he would live life in the easy lane. He was keeping everything for himself. It's more blessed to give than to receive. Acts chapter 20 and verse 35. Notice this, letter C, number 1. The farmer was rich and he had means to build bigger barns. This leads me to believe that maybe he was wealthy enough to have hired servants working his fields for him. Wouldn't it have been better to give extra to them and better to give extra to people who were in need rather than storing it all up for himself? James chapter 5 verses 1 through 6 talks about that, in chapter 2 verses 14 through 17. Again, nothing wrong with taking care of ourselves, taking care of our family, certainly in giving to the church and works of the church, but there was a selfishness here that it was all about him. God blesses us so we can bless others. I don't know what your bank account says, other than I know for all of us it's the same amount. and it's zero, because everything belongs to the Lord. He's just loaned it to us for a period of time. We're using it to be good stewards of it while we're here, and then we do good with it to bless others the same. So what is actually mine is zero. It's just on loan from the Lord for however long He chooses to let me have it, and then to do good with others. He was under the impression that he would live a long life, but this was not the case. Verses 19 and 20, we see that he thought he would live, take ease, eat, drink, be merry. God said to him in verse 20, "You fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then who will those things be?" Life is but a vapor, James chapter 4. How many people think that they have many years and time to prepare? Like the one who said, "Go away for now. When I have a convenient season, I'll call on you." But really, we don't know when the end of life shall be. In a moment's time, when you take your final breath, everything you own, whether it be much or little, now belongs to someone else. Now, here's a note that I did jot down by Brother V.P. Black. That's not in your notes, but I had jotted this down. I heard him say once on one of the videos, he said, a man can go out to his property and stand there and look around and say, everything I have, this is mine. This is all mine. He said, 100 years ago, somebody else was standing in that same spot saying, everything here is mine. And 100 years from now, someone else will be standing there saying the same thing. What's most important is how we use what God has given us, and certainly in preparation for our eternal souls. Where's your treasure? It needs to always be in heaven. Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 21, the place where it cannot be taken from us as long as we're faithful to God. Letter 4, number 4 I should say, Roman numeral number 4. This came from Brother Gaddis Roy in his little book, Sermon Outlines on the Parables of Jesus, The Rich Fool's Blunders. He left God out of his plan. He thought his soul could be satisfied and provided for with material things. How many people thought that was the case? If I just have a little more, then everything will be okay and I'll be satisfied. That's not the case. He thought he had a perpetual lease on life. I'll live many more years. God said, you're dying tonight. You will not see the morning. The verdict, the world considered him to be a wise man, and he probably was. Probably a guy that you would want to start your business for him. God said he was a fool because he did not have his priorities right. And again, there's nothing wrong with being wealthy. Nothing wrong with that at all. The problem here is it severed his relationship with God. That was the problem. In the conclusion, when it comes to money, you cannot go to heaven with it. Do not go to hell because of it. How many have sacrificed their eternal lives because of their hunger and unrighteous relationship with money? One other thing that this is not in your notes, but I jotted it down just a moment ago. We need to be careful to not be judgmental and make judgmental calls based on appearance when we look around and we think other people might have a lot and they don't do good with it or they waste it. It's easy to look around maybe at what other people purchase or what other people do and think, oh man, they've got all kinds of money. They should be doing more with it. Don't be judgmental with what it appears other people are doing. Some people might choose to spend their money differently than you. Nothing wrong with that. One person might choose to spend their money on fancy vehicles and clothing and buy a new phone every other month as they come out. Another person might choose to spend the same amount on an overseas trip. That's your choice. That's your right. You can choose to use your money how you want to as long as God is first. And as long as it's not sinful. It's easy to be judgmental. Something we're going to talk about when we get into the parable of the talents. I think one of the reasons he chose for the one-talent man to be the one who did wrong is because a lot of times we expect, perhaps, that, the wealthy should cover it, carry it all. And that's not the case. We all have a responsibility in the work of the church. And I need to make sure that we're not being judgmental when it seems that others are using money in ways that I would not use it. So that's important to remember as well. So tonight we covered money and idol in every generation. Next week We have 5 left after tonight. We'll talk about receiving and granting forgiveness. I'll see if I can find that quote by V.P. Black, but it went something like this. It said, we must remember that the Bible talks more about money than it does forgiveness, baptism, singing, the Lord's Supper, and he went on with half a dozen or so biblical items. And he said that the Bible talks more about money than it does all these other areas combined. And in that quote, he said that there's not one book in the Bible, or maybe he limited it to the New Testament. I'll try to find the quote when Levi comes up to speak, that does not mention money. So it's a very serious subject. We have to have it, we use it, but we must have the right relationship with it, a godly relationship with it. I'll turn it over to Levi.